I'm a senior sales engineer here at Actian, which is now a division of HCL Software. I'm going to be giving a talk on some work I've been doing recently with the new external Smartblobs. So just a little bit on my background. I've been working with Informix for a long time. I started building Informix applications with RDS Informix 3.3 back in 1986. I've done a lot of programming in C, ESQLC, and 4GL, standard engine, things like that. I actually worked for Informix Corporation as a consultant and trainer for over 10 years. And then I got acquired to IBM as a sales engineer. So I worked there for 5 years, from 2001 to 2006. So most of my earlier career was working with Informix. In 2006, I actually came to the Actian Corporation, which actually owns Ingress, as well as probably 5 other database products. And I've been here at Actian doing other things since 2006. And it was just kind of serendipity that HCL acquired Actian, and with the IPP arrangement with IBM and Informix, it turns out that I'm working with Informix again. And so I'm really excited about it because I love the product. You can see here in my office, these are some scenes from my office here, and you can see some of the signage back here in the light. I worked at the Informix office for many years, so whenever we moved or changed logos and stuff, I gleaned some of the office signage and things like that. So I have all that stuff around my office. Anyways, what today's agenda is, I'm going to give a brief overview of the new external Smartblobs, and then I'm going to show you this idea I came up with when working with a customer down in South America. It's kind of curious. Just a small disclaimer, I am not from Informix Engineering, nor am I an expert blob user. I've written a ton of 4GL programs and a ton of applications and solutions, but never one that highly utilized blobs. So just want to give that little disclaimer. Okay, why does version 15 have external smart blobs? Well, okay, storing large objects in the database is a great way to manage them. We know that with permissions and everything, but storing them in the database makes the database itself really, really big. And so big databases take a long time to back up. So if you're really putting a lot of blobs in the database, this becomes very problematic. And we've also learned over the years that retrieving large objects out of the database is not as efficient as direct file system access. So that's a little bit problematic as well. So version 15, we listened to the customers and we came up with external smart blobs. It's a new type of storage for large objects. The large objects themselves are actually stored on the file system in individual files. Of course, these can be spread around on the file system, but the metadata about those files is stored in the database. So as before, you still insert your large object into the database, you still select them, you can still delete them, and it's all managed from the database. But now you can actually access the large objects themselves directly from the file system if you want. It's all optional. So if you have an existing application that uses blobs already, those applications won't change. You can just change where the blobs are stored. And in addition, in version 15, there's some new functions available to get metadata details, which I'll show you an example of. So how do you create an external smart blob? Well, there's new on-spaces options to make the smart blob space external. So now we're going to have these capital E parameters here that tell you, like, here's the directory on the file system where I want this external smart blob space. And this E here tells you how many subdirectories that you want. I just have one here because I just have a little demo system, but you might want to spread things around quite a bit more. So these new capital E options to on spaces turns that smart blob space into an external smart blob space. So once you have your external smart blob space, then you simply, whenever you create a table with a column, you put that column in that external smart blob space. So it's very easy to make an external smart blob. So now here's an example of an insert statement. An insert, of course, is going to create a new row in the table. But with the external smart blobs, the insert will now create a new file on the file system. And what's going to happen is that we're going to use our internal identifier as the file name for that file. So here's my insert. I'm going to insert this XML file. And here's the other values in my columns here. And this is where my smart blob space is. In this example, this is just a demo, /home /Informix /blog /resources ESB SPDIR1. And then underneath it, there's another, this is that one directory that gets created per that E parameter that I mentioned. So if I do a list, after I've inserted the row, if I do a listing, you're going to see that I have a file out there called LO2,210X. It was a very cryptic file name, and this is basically just the internal identifier that we already had for the blob, but now it's manifested as the file name for that particular blob. So that's how it works. And so I was down, yeah, so here's the file name. Here's the directory names. Sorry, this is kind of wrapped around there. So what happens when you delete the block, the row, it'll remove the row from the table, and it'll also remove that file from the file system. There's a new function called ifxLOPath, which after you insert a row that has smart blobs, you can have more than one external smart blob columns in your table, by the way. But anyway, you can use this function to find out the resulting fully qualified path name of the external smart blob that was just inserted. So in the case that I just showed you, I could call this function and it would return this whole thing. This is where my blob is actually located. So anyways, I was actually talking to a customer down in Peru, and they were very excited about the external smart blob feature, but when they learned that this is the type of file name stuff they were going to have to deal with, they didn't really like it too much because it's extremely cryptic, and you can't. This name is meaningless to you. It means nothing. You can't tell what it is at all. And so the customer was, kind of wishing we had made it a little more user friendly. But that's pretty impossible to do because who knows how any one customer might want to name these file names logically. So for example, in my example, that form, it would be nice if you could have, if the resulting file name could have been something more like this, where it's categorized under the company name. Remember, I had the company name in my call. See how I had the company name and the year and the name and the form name. It'd be a lot more usable if, be a lot more usable if the resulting file name was something like this. Something like this. But that's not how it works. So I saw the disappointment in the customer, and I was, I went about doing other things at work for a while, and I finally thought of this idea that it's actually a very simple idea using stored procedures and triggers to actually manifest these user-friendly file names for the customer. And it's kind of an interesting, curious idea. And everybody, the Informix engineers thought it would be very interesting and thought that I could share it with you today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically create a shadow directory of meaningful file names. So the file names as Informix creates them are still absolutely going to exist, and that's where the file names are. But I'm going to create a shadow directory with logical names that point to those file names. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide where I want to put my shadow directory structure. You don't have to do this, but it's probably a good idea to keep all of your shadow directories in one place. So in this example here, I decided I'm going to create my shadow directory in home Informix blog resources user friendly. And it's also a good idea to think about using some unique keys in this solution to avoid file name duplication. For example, I might have two people at my company named Sanchez, and so you wouldn't want these logical names to be duplicated when they're really different entities. So for each large object column, I'm going to create a create link stored procedure. I'm going to create an insert trigger, a delete link stored procedure, and a delete trigger, and then optionally a change link and an update trigger. It's a very minutia, but I thought about creating an insert link and delete link and change link, but you don't really insert logical links on the file system, you create them. So that's why these things are called create and change versus update and insert. But you can name them whatever you'd like. So my little example scenario here is that maybe I have tax forms that I store in my database, and I really want to see these external Smartblob, air quote files organized by company and year, and I want the file names to be last name dot form name. So I'm going to insert a 2023 tax form 123 for a customer named Sanchez who works for Actian. And so I really want in my shadow directory tree, I would really like a file to result called or something to look like Actian/2023/Sanchez.taxform123.52, which is the ID. So what will happen over time is that all of the 2023 tax forms for the different employees of Actian will all end up in the same directory, but they'll all have separate file names, different file names, unique files and names because I've included this ID here at the end. So this is my create link stored procedure. So I pass to it the components that I want to have make up that directory tree structure. So here's my my shadow directory base directory, and then I've also added. So I want my directory tree to be Actian, and then the year, and then the file name. So in my stored procedure here, I want to make sure that that directory tree exists. So I'm going to create a command called make dir -p, and if this whole tree structure, subtree structure doesn't exist, the -p will make sure that that goes and gets all that goes and gets created, because I can't create a file without the directory structure existing. And the beauty and one of the powers of Informix is that we do let you make system calls from stored procedures. Not everybody does, but we do. So this simply executes a make dir on the basis of my item here. And then I form the full name, the fully qualified path name that I want there. And so what I'm going to do, this is the resulting name that I want. So what I'm going to do is after the row is inserted, I'm going to call that function ifxlo path, and it's going to give me the resulting cryptic file name that resulted from my insert for that person. So once I have that, then I'm going to formulate a logical link creation statement that's going to create a logical link from my cryptic file name to the desired file name in my directory tree structure. So that's what that's going to do. Hopefully that makes sense. So then correspondingly, I'm going to have a create trigger that on insert on cust forms, for each row, it's going to call create link with the form name, the company name, the year, the last name, and the form name, all the components that I need to make up my logical file name. So my delete link and trigger are going to look fairly similar. I create a procedure delete link, and it's going to set my directory here. And then I'm going to form the full name of the item that I want to delete. I already know what that is. The database is going to take care of deleting the cryptic file, but all I'm trying to do here is delete that logical link that I had earlier created in my directory structure. So I'm gonna formulate the fully qualified path name, and then I'm going to formulate an operating system command to remove that link name and then execute it. So what's going to happen when the row is deleted from the database is going to delete that cryptic file out there, but this trigger is going to fire, and it's going to cause my logical link to be removed from my directory structure. Hopefully that makes sense. Then finally, and this is optional, you may or may not want to update these things, but here's a change link one, and it's a little bit longer. But let's say for example, Ms. Sanchez gets married, and now her last name is Jones or something like that, and you may want to change the name of that file from Sanchez to Jones. So what this procedure does is it figures out what the original name was here, and then removes the original logical link, and then formulates the new logical name that you want, and then and then executes that. Yeah. Okay. So that's what that does. So I created an update trigger on this, and then so what happens is that if I update the row, and you only have to do an update of the things that make up the file name. So let's say, for example, there's another column in the table called gender or something like that. You don't have to do an update trigger on gender because that doesn't affect the logical name directory structure at all. So you only have to fire a trigger on the update of one of these items that's in my logical name components. Okay, so let's do a little demo here. Okay, so up here on, or I'm sorry, down here on the lower right here, this is the directory of my external Smartblob space right here. And up here, this is where I want my user-friendly version of this to be. So what I'm going to do over here is I have a little Java program over here. It's probably an easier way to insert blobs, but as I mentioned before, I'm not a Java expert or a blob expert. So I have a little Java program that's going to insert Schulte here. Okay, I'll make sure I compiled it. I can't remember if I did or not. Oops. Oh, hang on a second. Not a Java expert either. Okay, I have an old compiler, so those are just some warnings. Okay, so now I'm going to execute that program. Oh wait, before I do that, I'm going to do an ls over here, and you're going to see this empty. These are empty. So I'm going to execute this program, which is going to insert one row into my database that has an external smart blob. So what you're going to see over here now, you're going to see that in this, let me expand this a little bit. You're going to see here in my little smart blob space, you're going to see this really cryptic file name. And that's actually the smart blob itself. I mean, I can actually cat that. It's some XML file thing that I had. See if that it's so you can directly access whatever was in the blob. You can access it now directly from the file system. So what you're going to see up here now is there's going to be stuff up here now too. You're going to see now that there's a subdirectory now called Actian, and there's a 2024. So I think I put her in 2024. So you're going to see here that there's a Schulte tax form 123.4. That's my ID name. And what this really is a logical, let me expand this. What this really is a link that points to that. Okay? So if we go and let's put another one in there. Let me put a 2023 Jones. Okay, so I just put another person in here. Should be 2 files in here now. Yep, there's 2 files now. And then there should be another directory in here now for 2023. And there's the link there for Jones tax form 123. So let's see. I believe. Okay, so the last form ID that I put in there was number 5. Change this here to 5. So I'm gonna delete that row Jones from the database. Okay, so what's going to happen now is over here in the external smart blob directory, you're going to see that there's only one file there now. So the Informix database took care of deleting that. And then you're going to see here that my store procedure and trigger took care of deleting the file there. So now what we're going to do, let's see, did I have a change one in here? How are we doing on time? Oh, perfect. Let's do an update. So we're gonna change the last name of form ID number 4 to DiCaprio. I think it was Schulte before. There's a joke there somewhere, I guess. Let's see. So let's do a DB access. So we see that the row's been updated, and you'll see here that in the database the file date didn't change because we didn't really update the blob itself. We just updated some of the other columns in the database. So this file didn't change, but over here, I think it was in 2024, you're going to see now that this file name, this logical link, I deleted the old one that said Schulte, and I created a new one that's DiCaprio, whatever. So you can see here that this, it's actually really simple. And so you can see that, over time, you're going to have this nice, clean looking, logical directory structure with all of your blobs categorized and filed however you want. I mean, maybe you want your forms categorized by year and then the company, or maybe year and then the last name. It's totally up to you how you want to formulate these user-friendly names that simply point to these cryptic names that you have on the file system. I hope that made sense. I have some things to talk about related to this. One moment, let me find my browser. Swap. Okay, so this was just an experiment that I created for a customer. I have not used it in production. So there's some things I knew that I think one would need to beef this up a little bit. One needs to explore and maybe lock down the shadow directory permissions. So for example, somebody could come out there and delete one of my logical links there, and then I wouldn't have my user-friendly name anymore. So you probably want to control, I mean, that's one of the beauties of the database is that the database takes care of things for you, but when you start putting things out on the file system, you have to start worrying about that as well. Manual blob delete. So somebody actually might go out and delete that external smart blob itself. It's possible that a user might somehow delete the physical smart blob file from the directory. In this case, there's not going to be a trigger that fires. The row's not going to be deleted from the database, and that's why the trigger doesn't fire. So the blob file just goes missing. So you might want to have a batch job that runs periodically to go make sure that the directory structure matches up to the blobs that are really out there. But before you go to that, you really need to make sure that the permissions are controlled on the external smart blob space, which I'm sure they are by default, but just you need to make sure about that. Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's possible that a user might delete one of the logical links formed by the infrastructure. The solution that I have here doesn't detect that. There's nothing here that would detect that, or I couldn't think of anything that would detect it. So I would suggest if you think that's going to happen and you don't have your permissions locked down, it might be a good idea to have a periodic maintenance job that basically crawls through the blobs that you have and using that IFXLO path and make sure that the links still exist. And if they don't, then you can just simply reform them using the technique I just showed you. Number 4, unique identifiers. I used one unique identifier in my little example here of the form ID, but you're going to want to make sure that these file names that you form aren't duplicated, because otherwise you're going to get these user-friendly names overwritten and you're not going to have a complete data set there. So you might want to think about, you don't want to use too many unique IDs in there, because then the file names start looking ugly too. But you need to think about that a little bit. I didn't get around to it, but in my little example, I might eventually delete delete all the blobs in one of the directories. And so ideally you'd actually want to delete the directory tree infrastructure. There's probably some option to RM or something like that that you could add to the delete stored procedure so that the operating system could check to see if the directory was now empty and therefore get rid of that directory up the chain. That would probably be a really great idea. I did not explore that. Number 6, it's well known that you can't have excessive triggers and stored procedures on an OLTP system, heavy OLTP system. It's going to add a bunch of overhead. So I have never used this in such a situation, but I'm kind of under the assumption that you're not going to be doing just crazy OLTP activity on blob columns and tables and things like that. So I've not tested this at scale, so I'd be interested if anybody ever does to see what happens. Also, I did not consider null values in here. So for example, if I inserted a row with no last name or something like that, then that would kind of mess up my directory names and things like that. So you either need to make sure that you have columns with not null or check for that and handle it somehow in the store procedure. All right. Are there any questions on this? I mean, if there's not, I actually want to finish with a joke here. I have a joke for everybody.
Well, I got a real quick question.
Yes.
How do the external Smartblobs work with enterprise replication, assuming Smartblob logging is on?
I do not know that.
Okay.
I have to refer to my disclaimer. That is an excellent question.
I think
I
I
don't
can
know.
confirm that it does work.
It does not?
It does work. So
Oh.
it's from ER's perspective, it's just a smart blob. So ER does not care whether it's external or not. And it also does not care whether the SP space is configured as an external SP space on the source and or the target.
Okay. Other
Great
question.
answer.
Thank you. The other one I've got is, will the XCompat data blade still work against these with specifically the DBS lob get length function?
That I don't know, but I would not see why not.
Okay.
If you want to send me
sorry, I think I know the answer. I think that there is there is some tricks here. There is no append and no change, so you can only insert physically the blob or update. So as far as you use for example, the length function or other functions that do not try to make an offset or update something inside the blob, it will work.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. I haven't tested this yet, so it's been on my to-do list, so I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions?
Actually, sorry, one more. If the file system is out of space, would you get the same kind of error as if Smartblob space was full?
I don't know. That's a great question too. Error. So what is the error if the file system's full?
I would hope that the file open would just fail and that would be reported.
Yep.
I mean, it could fail for various reasons, for permission reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
The file is not available at all. I would be surprised if that would not be reported back.
Okay.
Yes. Tom, if you remove the file, trying to get this blob will not get an error. You will get a null. And this is by design.
Yeah, if you remove the external Smartblob file, it doesn't affect the row at all. I've experimented with that.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't really work in reverse.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
What about transaction rollback, right? If you do a delete and then roll back the transaction.
Yes. Yes.
That does work. Yes, I've played with that as well.
Well, does
Yeah.
the file come back or it's gone?
But the metadata aspect of the SBlob is completely unchanged. It's exactly the same. So
right, but the file deleted and altogether when the transaction is
From what I recall talking, I think they have to delay the actual file deletion in order to get it back or something. I can't remember exactly what it was.
No, if you roll back, the file is deleted. Sure. 100%. Yeah.
Right. So that's something you have to be careful about.
I remember doing a little example with that, and it does function as you would want it to. Yes.
Which means what? Yeah. That the file is still there or the file is not there? Because Vicente is saying the file's gone if you roll back to delete.
Oh, we talking? Okay. I don't know. I will get clarification.
Okay. I mean, we can all play with it, but
yeah, those are good questions. Maybe we can convince engineering to do another one of these sessions on this. Yeah.
Also, I put a comment in the chat. In addition to the functions that you've done, which is great, I love it. You'd also probably want a parallel function to IFX hello path that returns the shadow path.
It returns the what? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Shadow file.
Well, I don't. The database doesn't really know about that. I mean, you could augment this and have a metadata table in the database that stores these shadow file names for you. That could be interesting. So that could be a good idea. But anyway, there is a blog about this. Let me can I share my joke with you, and then I'll show you my blog. I thought I had a clever slide build on here, but I guess I don't in here. But when I worked at IBM, of course, in the early days, and probably still now, they have a push to convert people to DB2, and I was asked to help. I was probably more forced to help write a book about how customers can transition from Informix Dynamics Server to DB2. And I didn't write this, but one of my colleagues that did write this did a section on indexing, and this is a little chart of a B tree index, how it would formulate, and it has these random values in here. I don't know if any of y'all still have a copy of this book. It's not published anymore, but if you read these letters in a vertical fashion, there's a little golden nugget in here. It says IDS is the best here. This is inside the IDS to DB2 transition book that's no longer published, but it's kind of a funny little thing. Let's see, the blog is it's on the Actian website, and I've asked Karen to make sure that anytime blogs about Informix are published on the Actian website itself, that it would be nice if information about that be published on the IIUG website. So we have a couple of blogs out here, but if you go to www.acting.com/blog and you just search for external Smartblobs, you'll find out that there's a there's a blog. I have a blog written about this, and it has all the little code samples that I showed you today in it. And there's a little disclaimer up here that at version 15.0 doesn't have this function defined, and so you have to actually execute this extra statement to get this to work. Hopefully they're going to fix that in a upcoming release. But anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed the talk today. I enjoyed doing it. I love working with Informix, and that's really all I have. Tom and Bruce.
Thank you for doing this, Mary.
Yeah.
I will
Hopefully
try to. I'll try. I will try to get this up on the YouTube channel by Monday.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Bye
much.
now. Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.
Bye.